Let's see. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live for the first time for the Sports Roundtable podcast, which is brought to everybody through the Unstoppable Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Keegan Lamar. And if you haven't been following any of this, if this is your first time being exposed to some of the stuff that we do, I'll kind of set the table here and describe a little bit of what we do. But first and foremost, before I get into that, I would love to take a moment and just turn it over to some of the other people who are here. I'll do a quick introduction at the end, but I want to first, I'd love to turn it over to Kim. So Kim Brady, you are a dear friend of mine. We have been on a book project together. We are co-authors together. And you're all around just amazing individual. Please take a moment to just introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Kim Brady, and I am a business coach and serial entrepreneur and twice published author because of that book project with you, Keegan. So Forever Athlete sitting behind me. That's kind of my jam. I help people in transition from career or sport into entrepreneurship, as well as transition coaching.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love it. Appreciate it. Morgan, you are also, you're someone who I met through Bill Dean, who is not here. Bill will be joining us probably for the next episode. But with all the conversations that we've had so far, I can absolutely call you a friend at this point. And you're a great human being, an awesome colleague in the mental performance and sports and health and wellness space. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi. Hey, thanks for that intro. I feel the same about you and as well as about Kim and Bill, and Bill's not here. So I appreciate the intro. Yeah. Morgan Koth, CEO and founder of a company called Ascentus Health. We have two platforms, Star Support and Wellness U, dealing with the culture and toxicity and stigma around mental health in organizations, colleges and universities with students, student athletes and employees of organizations, to kind of help them understand the culture that they're in, as well as giving them those self-help, evidence-based resources to deal with mental health, mental wellness, physical wellness, and just to better perform within themselves, and also have that organization perform so they can get that cultural aspect of support, belonging, and inclusion that I think is so important in what we're dealing with today.
Beautiful. And for those of you who do not know who I am Keegan Lamar. I am a mental performance coach, have been for the past 5 years. And prior to that, I was a collegiate football player for the University of Colorado. And my mission is simple, is to just arm the next generation of athletes with information that I wish I had when I was playing, which circles around a very simple formula that your performance in anything that you do is based off of two different things. Number one, your potential to be able to actually go and get those results. And two, the distractions that stand in the way. And I think that all those things can be solved by putting yourself in a position where mentally you're performing at your absolute best. So what the hell are we doing here? Right. So this is, I believe, the 5th episode that we've done so far. And for those of you who are not accustomed to hearing this, or you're hearing it for the first time, you can go check out on the Lamar Coaching YouTube channel. You can go check out on the Unstoppable Mindset podcast. Some of these previous recordings, but what we're looking to essentially do here is bring a group of individuals together who are specialized within mental performance, and work within it and have the intention of helping out, whether it's current athletes, former athletes, or people who are just fans, understand more about the parts of the game that you don't get to see. And so we dive into whether it's hot topics or articles that we find or other stuff that we find interesting that we want to dive into deeper, explain some parts of it in a method that a lot of people may or may not have exposure to, and also give our own opinions on some things from our own backgrounds and our own expertise. So tonight, we're diving into one of my favorite platforms. It has slowly become one of my favorite platforms, is the Players Tribune. And the reason I like it is because there are they have a special section of the website that is specifically about athlete stories, right? Diving into athletes and their background, and whether it's their own personal struggle with mental health. I know Kevin Love was was I think my first article that I read on the Players Tribune, before watching a video about money with Clinton Portis, who, if you haven't seen that, that's amazing. But it was this really rare read where someone felt comfortable opening up about something that was weighing heavy on them, and it's really kind of this voice of the player. And so a lot of people know certain athletes are struggling with certain things, and I've found it more frequently than not, the Players Tribune goes after some of these athletes to be able to give them a platform to be able to voice some of that stuff, which I find to be wildly helpful. So if you, and obviously this is not sponsored by anybody, Players Tribune, if you want to sponsor this, hey, that'd be great. It's an awesome platform. And so a really good article that actually came out on May 4th. So this was just under a week ago, was from Nazem Kadri. And if you don't know who that is, you'll understand that right now the NHL playoffs are currently ongoing. And one of the teams that are in the playoffs right now is the Colorado Avalanche. Now, if you are a hockey fan, then you probably know who Nazem Kadri is. And Morgan and I, we were touching on this right before we went live. He has 6 suspensions, and I think the most ever was 8. So he has a pretty decent track record for, whether some people want to call it dirty play, other people who support him might say unfortunate circumstances. Either way, he has had quite the journey as a professional athlete, especially in the NHL. So he had an article that got published last week that is called "I Am Who I Am," and it's really interesting because, I mean, honestly, for a lot of different reasons. Now, the way that we structure this, and you may see me messing around on my side with some visuals and other stuff, or maybe I'll just keep track on my side, and because we normally put 90 seconds up on the clock for people to respond, but usually we also have 2 topics. Tonight, we're just going to focus on one because there's a lot to come into this, and I want to have it be a little bit more conversational if you all are open to that. Now, if anybody is watching this live, please feel free. I'll be able to see people watching live, the numbers and stuff like that. And if I see people live and they want to come on, I think they can request to be able to come in and watch. But we're going to dive into this. First and foremost, I would love to open this up to initial things that really stood out to you. And Morgan, we were kind of talking about some of the things that stood out to you earlier. I'd love for you to maybe kick us off and tell me, as you were reading this article, what stood out to you that just struck a chord with you?
You know, the first thing that came to mind when I'm gonna, not when I first started reading it, but after I read it and after I did the research into it, watched every single hit that he got suspended for. Looked at the comments from the hits, looked at, what he did after the hits, and then, reading the article. And so first thing that comes to mind is where there's smoke, there's fire. Like you said, the longest, the most suspensions was 8 suspensions, right? He's at 6. So there's, in betweens, right? So he's not the worst, but he's up there. And it seems like when he makes these hits, he does seem like he doesn't mean to do it. He doesn't, he's not going back after him, right? He's doing something sometimes in retaliation to something that he saw from a teammate, which, in hockey, lore, you're like, oh, that's the guy we want to be teammates with, right? But nobody else likes. But at the same time, he's doing these things. He's hitting kids. He's hitting guys in the head. He's putting people out. And about the man, you read the article and he seems like, I'm the Mamba mentality. I'm the Kobe guy, and he says that there's no place for that in hockey, right? Overtly, there's no place, he says in hockey in the article. But it feels like reading that, it's not that he's being disingenuous. I think he's being truthful to what he believes he is, right? He says, I am who I am. He believes he's a good person. He believes, I think, that he wants to do well by his teammates and by the organization and play as hard as he can with that Mamba mentality. He's got a daughter now. I mean, what, 6 times? I mean, and he's going after people's heads. It's tough to put those two pieces together and say, yeah, okay, you are who you are. That's great. Let's play some hockey and let's forget about those suspensions, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my take, my first initial take. And we're going to dive down a little bit deeper on my thoughts on exactly all those things. But that's my first initial thoughts.
Awesome. Kim, what were your initial takeaways after looking at this article?
I think when I read it this morning after you'd sent it to me, and I didn't review all the hits that you had talked about, Morgan, but I reviewed a few of them based on what he had mentioned in the article, so I had something to relate to. And, obviously I play a contact sport, but it doesn't end up in fighting, right? But I do play a contact sport. I do have teammates who are enforcers. That's what I call them. People who literally were the ones that would hit someone on my behalf if I was taken out. For example, I had a teammate who very much was like, you hurt my Kimmy, I'm going to come and kill you. And she literally got red carded because she almost went in and broke someone's ankle right after I got pummeled, and had to write a letter to the school and the league to allow her to still play in her senior year. So we do have those players across all of our sports, right? Where they do go in to quote unquote protect their teammate, and they are being that teammate. However, there were certain things that I thought was interesting about the article in relation to watching the hits. So the one where he said that he wished his stick hadn't gotten that high. It's almost as if the stick had its own energy. And if we're channeling Harry Potter and you just said, here's my broomstick, it got too high, there's this lack of accountability or ownership in the language he uses to own the behavior that could have literally killed somebody. I think that's the part for me where you can have a mentality that says, I'm going to play within the regulations of my sport. Yes, I know I'm going to get carded, or I know I'm going to do something. But you have to know that if you are a repeat offender, the damage that you could do to another person could result in them being really gravely injured. And I think that statement, I find from a mental health perspective, me being a former therapist, Morgan being in the therapy realm and mental health, et cetera, Mamba mentality wasn't necessarily about being the enforcer. It was about being the only one who was going to win at all costs. And there is a part of that there. And that all costs could take someone's life out. So I'm always going to lend toward the side of what ownership is he going to take. He's had 6 offenses that are this bad. Not 1, not 2, 6. And I think that that's a choice. It's a choice to harm and maim. And he's gotten very lucky that he hasn't quite done that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it, because one of the things that stood out to me when I initially read this was the very first part of it. And I'll throw it up on screen just in case anybody's watching this and actually wants to see a piece of this. The very first thing that he talks about is, I've got to start with what happened last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely agree with you, Kim, that like there's always some language. And the thing is, if you are going to be the win at all costs type of person, it takes what it takes. Like you're going to walk out of here the victor. Doesn't matter who stands in the way. You're going to burn down the village if you have to.
Mm-hmm.
Accept that. Right. And I will say that him starting with the hit last year and him feeling a sense of remorse, him probably thinking 1,000 different thoughts to himself, and him being open to talking about that. I don't know. And obviously I'll have to do some digging. I don't know if this is the first article that he's come out with regarding any of this stuff or not, but credit where credit is due. He took ownership of that. He was like, he felt disappointed. And clearly this year we still have obviously a lot of playoff left, and we'll see obviously how he does. And maybe this year he's positioned himself to be in a place where he does feel that sense of remorse. He does feel that sense of, you know what, it's time. It's time to be better, right? Like there's been 6 other times where I have tried to force the issue, and 6 times where it has, put my ass on the pine, where my season's over. And obviously there's labels and all this other stuff that's probably out there that he completely understands about himself, but he owns up to it. He owns up to the love some people have for him, and as just as much as the people who probably can't stand him. So in terms of a credit where credit is due, I give him that 100%. And that was what stood out to me, was if you were someone who had zero context on, like, if this was the first time you ever understood who Nazem Kadri was, and this was the first exposure you really had to him, you would think this is someone who is mature, and this is someone who wants to be different. Now, obviously, if you're a longtime fan of him, you might think of it in a completely different light. You might say this is him just trying to save his butt, and look good for something, which I totally get, right? So it just comes down to how we as a fan look at it. But when I first looked at it, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was this is someone who cares deeply about what he does, and clearly has understood that the game has not always enjoyed who he is or who he was, and demands him to be better. And he's hitting that brick wall of, it's time for me to be better. So that was probably my big thing that I take away from it. But let me go ahead and throw up on the screen. Let's see. So I'm going to share this, and I believe you guys, awesome. So yeah, we can see the article here. So this article, obviously over on the Players Tribune, big thing, like I said, the first thing he starts with is, I've got to start with what happened last year, right? And he talks about how he couldn't sleep, how the whole due diligence process there afterwards, and all these different things. Now, I want to take a moment and open it up back to everybody here, and under the topic of feeling remorse as an athlete, because Nazem Kadri is not the only person after doing something in a game who's ever, after a game, lost sleep about what they did. He's one of, I don't know, the 100% of every other athlete who, what could I have done differently to get a different outcome? Could I have done this? Could I have done that? Could I have done these things? I mean, first off, I'd love for you guys to share maybe a moment that still sticks in your mind, but then also transition it to, how did you end up actually coming to terms with it? Kim, I want to toss this over to you.
Oh my gosh. You are talking to a person who literally ran over every single game, every single play of every, I mean, I was that kid and player and athlete that truly struggled with letting that moment go to not affect the next 5 minutes or next 6 plays or next 6 passes. So it's something that I work on with my kiddos about having to have a short-term memory, right? And being a goldfish, to use a Ted Lasso reference, right? Like being able to, what's the next best play? What's the next best play? What's the next best play? And feeling like, and I remember it to this day, my worst play I think I've ever made, and my friends gave me grief about it because it was against them, was we had just won the state championship. It was my club team when I was a senior in high school, so the year prior to me going to college. And there were players on the state team, players on the regional team. I was on the state championship team. We had won that game. We were going into the regional championship game against Utah, and I was the last defender. And it was back when you could actually make a pass back to your goalkeeper and she could physically pick it up with her hands. At the time, that was the rule. I didn't make the pass strong enough. I didn't weight the pass properly, and the forward intercepted it into a 1v1 and scored against my goalkeeper. And we lost the game because of that play in the very last minute of the game. Again, this was 30 years ago, and I can feel every ounce of it. I remember what the sky looked like. I remember the weather. I remember my teammates. I remember hearing their disappointment. I remember what could I have done differently, right? And you just regret that I lost the game for my team. It wasn't just that I had lost. We lost because of me. And that regret of making a poor pass literally doesn't go away. So even if you gave your best effort, I know I gave my best effort, I made a poor pass. It happens all the time, right? He made poor decisions that could result in his failing in that moment, right? I think we all can come up with those pieces of and you just think about it and think about it. And I remember my teammates like, yeah, because we lost, you also made it where I couldn't go with my other team to the next game because it was all dependent on blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe that. It felt in that moment like I had lost an Olympic gold medal, that's what it felt like. And I could do nothing to get it back. It was a moment in time and it would never come back again. That opportunity would never be there again because I was going away to college. And we were then competing in college and playing in semi-pro teams. So that team was the last time I would play with all those girls.
Yeah. And being a goldfish and having a short-term memory, it's a really cool concept if you're a coach talking to an athlete like, hey, forget about it, next play, all this other stuff. But if you're an athlete, when you mess up and you're an athlete, that just sticks with you. So how do you actually, as an athlete, learn to become more of a goldfish? How do you put that into practice?
Asking me or Morgan?
This is back to you.
Okay. How do I put it into practice is to go out and do it again, to replicate the scenario of winning. And I think that that's the one piece is I know that my mistake didn't mean that I was a horrible athlete. I made a bad mistake. I think that's one piece of I'm not a loser or a winner. I won or lost a game. I am a good player and I can continue to get better. And the fact that I could replicate that same pass and put myself under same pressure situations, get my footwork to work better. I went out and just practiced more. Really, it was that what do I need to do to get better? How do I get faster? How do I make quicker decisions? How do I do better with the weight of my passes? How do I get better with both feet, not just one foot? How do I anticipate in advance? How do I get bigger, better, faster, stronger for the next opportunity of when another win or loss is on the line, whether it's a championship or not, right? And that certainly wasn't the last opportunity for me to win championship games, right? I don't know if I lost you there. Sorry. That's not the last time that I had the opportunity to win championships or to win games, both as a player and as a coach. There's always going to be a next game, really, if you're in that moment, right? Like that game did not impede me from competing. That mistake was a big mistake, but it made me stronger. It made me want to get better. I knew I was going to college. I knew I wanted to make the collegiate team. I knew I had a scholarship on the line and I wanted to earn it. So I would go out and train harder and I would ask more questions. I think that's what the difference is of how do you move and become a goldfish is not really forgetting about it. It's minimizing it and putting yourself in more hours and hours and hours of training.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Morgan, what moment is seared into your brain that keeps you up at night still, and how did you come to terms with it eventually?
I mean, it's once a day for me. So
that's classic.
No, but I played rugby in college, University of Connecticut, and there was a moment. One time, I want to go back to this article though.
Yep. This
article when he says, I've got to start with what happened last year. Reading that, I read it over again. Not while you were talking, Kim, but I read it over again. And it doesn't mention regret for what he did. It regret for what happened in the situation after. Yeah. So he's not like and I'm not in his head. I don't know what he's thinking, but just going back to that, he doesn't apologize for what he did to him to Justin.
Like the results
That's
that
not what
came
he.
from it.
Yeah, he's apologizing for what happened to his team, to the moment, to the calls, the situation that was going to happen from the front office and to the league, and that was the stress and anxiety that he was dealing with, not from the hit. That he said, I saw him lying there, and I was frustrated with myself with the situation, and I wanted to be anywhere else, not because I hit the guy and he's on the ground, but because what's going to come afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a guy. I want to relate it to a guy who gets caught cheating. He's not upset that he got, he's not upset that he cheated. He's upset that he got caught. Right? I mean, there's a little disconnect in that situation. But back to me. I know me better than I know him. So, I'm probably going to, there's a Nazem fan out there going, you know what? You don't know him. But with me, it was actually in rugby. And it's more than once, obviously. And I go to the goldfish situation. And for me, it's a little bit of a take on that. It's not quite the same thing. But I tell my son all the time, too, is don't take the highs too high and don't take the lows too low.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to get there in the middle and have that mindset, because if you get too high, it can get away from you. And if you get too low, it can also get away from you. So what happened with me is rugby, we were pretty good. And my position was a fly half. You know the thing about rugby, it's kind of like the quarterback of the team. I did a lot of kicking, a lot of, setting up plays, a lot of running, all the sorts of stuff that you would, think rugby people do. And that was me. And we made it to the Elite Eight, and the Elite Eight happened to have it was just like the 64 team in March Madness for basketball. Same thing for rugby in the rugby tournament for Division I. So getting there, we're in the Elite Eight, and we're playing Navy, and that game happens to be in South Carolina, my home state is South Carolina. My family was there, my dad was there, my parents divorced. I moved up to Connecticut with my mom and my sister when we were young, but the other part of my family was down there, so they all came to the game. And, being one of the people on that team, driving us there, I'm not driving us there, but getting us to that, there was a lot of good people on that team. I happened to be, fortunately, one of those people. I think I was pretty decent. And that game was probably my worst. There was all different things that happened. I kind of separated my shoulder a little bit early on in that game. Navy was just better than us. There's a lot of things that happened, but it was my worst game. And I'm 50 years old. That happened when I was 21. And I think about it, not often, but I think about it enough. And it was the first time my dad had really seen me play a sport. And I was excited. I was like, okay, this is what I do. This is how I play. Rugby is a physical sport. He was a physical guy. So I wanted to show him something, and I didn't. And that hurt. And, at the end of the game, my coach was with me, and, I introduced my father, and, my coach, was a great guy. He said all the right things. Hey, Morgan was one of the guys that got us here. Without him, we wouldn't be here. And my dad's like, yeah, no problem, but that was a problem. What did I learn from that? That it wasn't about, I needed to get better. I wasn't going to get better at rugby. I was already good enough to be at a high level in that sport, and I wasn't playing it professionally. It was just a matter of changing the way I thought about impressing and understanding that. And I think it really helped me with my son and the way he plays sports, and helping him cope and helping him understand that I'm going to be there no matter what. And I'm going to love him whether he plays basketball or whether he does chess. Mm-hmm. And that mindset, I think that was probably one of the better things that happened to me, was not performing well as an adult and having a child, because it helped me understand that it was okay to not perform well under that light and under that pressure. And it wasn't because of the pressure, or just circumstances. At least I tell myself it wasn't because of the pressure. But it's one of those things about, not taking things too high and too low when things happen. So that's what I get from that situation.
Yeah. My experience with that, what still is seared into my brain, and honestly, I mean, I got to be transparent about this. I think to this day, I have yet to come to terms with it. So this is something that, when if I really thought about it, the biggest thing that I can take away from it is it happened, right? It was what it was, and wasn't good or bad. It just was. But when I was a younger athlete, I didn't have these skills that I currently do now as performance mindset coach. When I was in high school, this was either my freshman or sophomore year. and we were playing Arvada West, and I think it was to it might have been for it was against Arvada West, and at the time I think it might have been a playoff game, and we wound up losing more than one touchdown. So obviously a lot of people were saying, it's not just, it's a culmination of things. It wasn't just me. But I was a long snapper, and so I was out there for punts, and I snapped the ball over the punter's head, and we wound up getting a safety, or having to take a safety because of it. To that day, that feeling of when you, and as a long snapper, this is kind of just seared into your brain whenever this happens, when you have just an astronomically bad snap for what you're used to, because there's usually some form of like range where you're like, this is perfect, and then this is usually where I hit if it's a little bit off, or kind of hits these general areas if it's off. This one hauled over the punter's head, and honestly, to this day, I have yet to really come to terms with it, because at just some point I got to a place where it was it just wasn't relevant anymore. I understood at some point that it's just a part of the game. And but here's the thing, for the rest of my playing career, it was always kind of in the back of my mind, right? Don't do this. Don't relive this. And it actually forced me to relive it a little bit more frequently during practices and stuff than I would have liked to experience, which obviously comes from the very basic principle that whatever you focus on, you have a tendency to have happen more frequently. Your brain can't process positive or negative. If somebody says, don't think of an elephant, you think of an elephant, right? So when it comes to how that impacted long term, it ate at me. It absolutely did. And it just got to a point where now, obviously as an adult, now that I have all the skills and the tools and the frameworks that I have, I can understand that failure and messing up, it's a part of it. It's a part of the game. It's a part of why you play the game, because there are moments like that. And when I had the amazing honor of actually being able to go back to my alma mater high school and coach for a season, that happened to a player on a team that we were facing. They shot the ball over the punter's head, and there was this like visceral gut feeling that I had for him in that moment, where I just so badly wanted to go over to him, because I could see him head down, blaming himself, all this other stuff. Like he was in complete and total disbelief. There was a part of me that wanted to actually approach him and say, this is a part of the game. It's at some point or another, you have to understand that perfection is not how the game is supposed to be for anybody. Because you don't grow if you hit perfection. It means you're not competing hard enough. It means you're not in the right arena. When you mess up, you learn more. And I wish I would have learned that sooner. And now, one of the things that I do when I work with people is, if they have something that really bugs them or sticks on their mind, or they have a moment like that, it becomes a 1%. How can you focus on that for the next week to make it 1% better, and have it be 1% of your everyday practice, where you face it head on and you understand how to be better at it? Not so that you can suddenly just be this great, amazing athlete, but so that you can eliminate the thought of that being the focus. But instead, you turn this, like horrible, gut wrenching feeling into something that now becomes a hyper focused practice for you, something that brings an intensity and competitiveness out of you. And I wish I would have known that sooner. But yeah, I never quite came to terms with it. And it's something that at some point faded away, but yeah, I never dealt with it well. It was always there. And so obviously Nazem Kadri, this stuff sticks with him. And Morgan, like you said, and this is and I'll say this, his tone of words, like he doesn't feel remorse of what he did, but he feels remorse of what happened because of it. It is very much, I mean, there have been plenty of athletes who have gone through stuff like this. You think of guys like, Kobe Bryant, right? Like when he played, I mean, I say that because Nazem talks about the Mamba mentality in here. Kobe got caught cheating, right? And the thing is, I don't know if it was something where he truly in his gut felt remorse about what he did. It was probably more of a remorse that he got caught and he had to deal with the things that came with getting caught. Now, obviously, I will never know what that is, but I do know from his mindset and the man he worked with, Tim Grover, it's very much in line with how Tim Grover feels. He thinks everybody has this dark side to themselves, this edge, this side of themselves that's kind of visceral, that allows people to almost be a bit of a hunter in some way, shape, or form. There's this freedom to it. And the people who feel remorse about that sense of being visceral and being a hunter and going all out and letting the dark side come out and play, because there's a lot of power that comes with it. People who feel remorse for it, he says, no, like if you were going to feel remorse about it, you wouldn't have even done it in the first place. If you do this, own it, right? If it's part of who you are, own it. And he even mentioned a guy like Tiger Woods. He was like, I didn't feel bad that, that Tiger Woods got caught. I felt bad that Tiger Woods sat there and apologized for it. This was part of who he was. And the fact that he would apologize for something that 100 times over, if he was given another chance, he'd probably still do it. Right. So there's a part of me that obviously still has some respect for him for not apologizing for what he did. Cause I guarantee you, because 6 times he has taken a shot, right? Nazem Kadri's taken a shot at somebody, and it means he doesn't feel remorse for taking the shot. It means he hates the fact that he gets caught for it, which is hard. Now, obviously, for some athletes, take that however you will. This is not an invitation for people to go out there and just start putting people in mortal danger. But this is something where if you are going to embrace something that you are actively engaged with, if you're going to do it, embrace it. Don't and own it. There's essentially be authentic with it. If you're going to do it, do it. Don't sit there and tiptoe around with all of it. I mean, if you're going to be an athlete, and if whatever you're going to do in life, like life's the one thing that you have to be all in on. So if you're going to do something, be all in. Now, obviously, I'd love to hear your all's thoughts on that, because that might not be a very popular opinion to everybody. Kim, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I remember reading Tim Grover's Relentless. That's what you're referencing a lot of, with Tiger and all that stuff. And while obviously I can pull a lot of things out of that, he is also targeting very much gender stereotypes and the hunter-gatherer, masculine, feminine stuff. And so for me, even though I could see certain things and I could understand certain things in the book, if he were my coach or if we were in a scenario, he wouldn't have suited me in wanting to not tap into that other side of humanity, right? Which is we both have masculine and feminine sides, whether that's dark or light or however we want to talk about it. But again, the elephant in the room here is he's going after very much specifically male athletes at a certain level under a certain premise scientifically based on that. So I do question certain things in it, of course. I know that there are a lot of women who would never be suited to that kind of coaching. I know a lot of men who wouldn't be suited to that kind of coaching as well.
Absolutely.
I think compassion is not a gendered emotion. I think emotion is not gendered. I think behavior is by choice and reaction is based on what we're familiar with. And that we, as you mentioned, I wish I knew this information when. Well, that's what youth and maturity and growing and learning and having more science behind this and understanding our reticular activating system, which is the thing that can't decide whether something's good or bad. It's the thing that we're focusing on. And how do we teach our subconscious to go after that thing that we want, and teaching our brains how to do that. And so being able to say, oh, well, Tiger Woods is going to continue being a cheater because that's what he's always known, because that's what he was raised in with his father being that way. There's still choice. I think that this is where it really is a fundamental decision of what do I want to do? And if you know, Nazem Kadri is going to go after who he is as a person, he embraces that completely. I don't have any issues with him with how he wrote this, or there's always just going to be questions. I think becoming a father might shift some of his understanding. What is she going to see as she grows up watching her father? Right? Like, I love that he mentioned in his article, she had no idea that he was sent home. He just was there to be able to be with her because he got sent home, right? But she knew him as a father, not as a hockey player, right? And I think there is something to growth and maturity. And over time, we'll see how he evolves. This is an evolution. And again, there's more to a person than just your sport. We talk about this all the time. He's a father. He talks about being a Muslim in America. He talks about being in Canada, talked about being in Toronto, talked about, you know, not wanting to be in Calgary, talks about being in Denver, talks about all these things. And I think if we look at people as multifaceted instead of singular, we can find the capacity to understand the humanity behind someone. And I think that that's probably the most crucial piece that we all should take from, you know, are we in his head, or how are we criticizing someone based on his article, right? None of us are him, but we all can question certain things. And I think it's important to question. I do challenge some of the philosophies and theories of Tim, but I think some of it makes sense for sure.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's very interesting to read.
Oh, incredibly interesting, because there's a lot of things that are a lot of people would probably consider to be probably controversial in some way, shape, or form. And obviously those are part of the code of ethics that he lives by. And there are certain things that I take away from it that I think are that can really help from a performance perspective. And I think there are things that for some individuals just simply do not make sense. But nonetheless, in the book that Kim and I are referring to is Tim Grover's From Good to Great to Relentless. Great read. He also has another book called Winning. I mean, really good to read, simply because it will spark something in you.
Right.
Morgan, your thoughts on that concept of, if you're going to do something, like go all out, right? Like, there's no need to tiptoe around certain things. And because we saw the example of Nazem Kadri and with him talking about how he feels bad about what happened because of it, but he obviously didn't say anything about the act of actually doing something. And as I've mentioned, I think if, you know, over the other 6 times that he's gotten caught, I think, you know, if he could go back and try and do them again, I don't know if he would do anything different. I think it's a part of his nature to be that hyper passionate player who's going to come after you. And he embraces that dark side of his play to be able to rise to the occasion. But obviously, for everybody, that's not always exactly how you should do things. Your reaction.
You don't have to be a great player to take somebody out. You don't have to take somebody out to be a great player, right? I mean, Mamba mentality is famous now, you know, with younger people in particular. Kobe is a legend in his game. I follow basketball a lot. Michael Jordan fan, huge Michael Jordan fan. Kobe Bryant, we've all seen the videos of him side by side with Kobe, with Michael Jordan doing the exact same moves. He studied Michael Jordan, and you can't say to a fault, just almost mirror image, right? His workouts are legendary, Kobe's and Michael's. He would stay up late. He would practice later than everybody. He would, you know, you're going to have to make some sacrifices to be one of the best in the world at what you do. But you don't have to be an ass.
Yep.
You just don't. You just don't have to be. Kobe Bryant's also legendary for not having a lot of friends, right? For not being a good teammate, for doing things off the court. And it wasn't until his later years when he was off the court that he finally had relationships with his kids and his wife. Sure, you have to make some sacrifices to be the best, but you don't have to make those sacrifices. LeBron James doesn't make those sacrifices, right? He just doesn't. So you look at these articles and you look at what Kadri wrote, and you see, okay, no Kobe, of course, but the guy who would bring every energy every single night, who wouldn't take a shift off, a guy who would do whatever it takes to win, right? The pressure, the attention, the scrutiny, none of that scared me. I wanted it. I know it's not for everyone, but it's never bothered me. Those are his words.
Yep.
And to me, that's a man who's driven to be as best as he can possibly be without regard, right, to what else is going on. And I think what Kim said, I think is very true to being mature, to being a father. We are more than our sport. We are more than the singular thing that we do at work. We are a lot of things as human beings. And I think having a child, just as I know having a child, definitely softens a person. And I think as Kobe got older and he had relationships with his children, you can obviously see it in his daughter, right? His relationship he had with his daughter, that he was definitely caring, compassionate, enthusiastic, and giving of his time, but he wasn't earlier, right? He wasn't when he was 18, 19 coming into the league. And so I think the same situation in, Toronto, a young hockey player just getting after it as much as he can, dealing with whatever he was dealing with and wanting to deal with how he wanted to deal with it. I think it was obviously, to be an elite player at that level, it's tough. It's not easy. There's a lot of things people go through. But at the same time, you don't have to do it that way. You don't have to get that dark side in you. You don't have to be that male or female that has to, grind it every day and, forget about everything else and just get that dark side, get angry to win. It doesn't have to be, right?
Yeah.
So,
there are numerous ways to be able to perform at an incredibly high level. There are some
absolutely.
people who you see play and I mean, also we have playoff basketball going on right now. I think one of the big things that I've noticed from a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, when he plays, he looks like someone who has fun, right? He's out there, he's intense, but he looks like he's enjoying himself.
Absolutely
Genuinely.
agree.
And he brings a fiery intensity to his game. And the guy is, I mean, I think pound for pound, the most dominant basketball player in the league at the moment. Because the guy, I mean, he's a Greek freak. I mean, the guy is insane. So
he's so insane, and he's like the nicest thing.
One of the nicest, goofiest, like, I mean, the night before like a playoff game, he was like stacking Oreos in his house, right? So like, and he live stream stuff like that. So he is another example of you can have peak performance with Morgan, as you were saying, without being an ass, right? So in this case, when it comes to,
and we're not saying he's an ass.
Yeah.
We don't know. But at the same time, you go after people's heads, there's a lot of people in the league that are, let's just call it what it is. There's a lot of people in the league that are better than him that don't have any suspensions.
Exactly. Right. So, I mean, there are numerous ways to be able to have peak performance. It just comes down to being mature enough to understand what not only works for you, but what also pushes you to be greater, because there are certain mindsets. Anybody can get angry. Anybody can get upset. Anybody can be a jerk. But there are a few people who can stand for having kind of a code of ethics of what they do and what they don't do and stay disciplined within that. And I think there are people who, get angry and let things get to their head. And, some people call it an alter ego or a persona that they might have, until it becomes not that, until it just becomes the person that you are. And in toying around, walking that thin line of, do I do this and stay disciplined and I don't get emotional in an angry or upset manner, and I can control that? Or do I do this and do I turn into, basically the schoolyard bully, and I don't, right. And you go out there and you piss people off, and and you just become kind of a hated figure. That choice, that distinction it's easier to fall into the jerk category because you're playing with fire. And at some point, you're going to get burned unless you can stay. And this is what I think made Kobe one of the greatest of all time, is when he played, he didn't get into it like that with other players. He understood how to put restraint on the beast when it needed to happen, because plenty of guys got up in his face. Plenty of guys were talking trash to him. He had every opportunity to probably retaliate or do something stupid. But what made him really good was understanding that showing restraint and showing discipline made you better. It made you more focused, and it actually brought him to another level. So anyways, it's different for everybody. This might be specifically what makes Nazem Kadri feel like he is the best athlete that he can be. Having that fire and everything else like that. But who knows? As you get older, there's different personas or alter egos that serve you better. For some younger guys, they can toy around with that emotional side of all of it because they have the energy to do so. And then as they get older, they change, right? They become different when they play. So it'll be very interesting to see how this playoff series continues and how the playoffs as a whole for him continue. Another thing,
just one comment on what you just said, that I think it sometimes can get, as an athlete, I know that I felt sometimes when I would get angry, I would play better. And that's just silly, right? As you get older, you realize that doesn't make any sense, because you should play hard all the time. And you did play hard. I did play hard. As you get older, you realize. And it might be the situation with him is that, you get to this level and you've played such a high level and you've played such a way for so long that if you don't do that anymore, are you still going to be that same player?
I think having the acceptance and the awareness that as time goes on, you have to be a different player is a really powerful recognition, right? And a lot of athletes don't realize that until the game's past them. And they say, if I had learned to adapt the game to my experience level, because as you gain more experience, the game changes for you. Obviously, by the time you've gained a lot of experience, your body's different, your mindset is different. And when you can change your play style, when you can change the mental side of the game for yourself, it can make all the difference. And a lot of people realize that far too late. And obviously, after reading this, like, every part of me wants to be in support of him and seeing that change actually happen.
Yeah.
Because I'd be the first person to say, like, I don't care if you've gotten into, the brawl at the palace or something. Like, I always thought of someone like Ron Artest as like, you know what? He's got another shot. And if he gets that shot, what will he do with it? And I think Nazem Kadri thus far has taken a real step in the right direction. Clearly, the Avalanche are playing at a very high level. And he's saying a lot of really good things in here. And every single ounce of me is in support of him continuing his pursuit of being a greater athlete. One of the other things that I did want to talk about, so in here, obviously, he mentions a few other things like, his time with Toronto. He absolutely loves it. He didn't want to leave. And he was really kind of, some of the other stuff that he talked about in here, and how Denver has been amazing for him, for his daughter to, raise his kid, be able to have a home. He mentions, like, he feels privileged to be a part of the team and the community. He believes in this group. But the one thing that I do want to kind of touch on is role modeling, because we've mentioned this a few times. He used to study Kobe's interviews, and he's all about the Mamba mentality. We've mentioned it a bunch. I want to talk about role modeling for a second, because every athlete does it. I mean, for me growing up, I didn't know what the hell a long snapper was until I taught myself in high school and was like, hey, I can go somewhere with this. But I mean, I very much looked up to Troy Polamalu. I loved his play style. I loved the way that he flew out there. Now he was not very liked when he was at USC at all. But I'll tell you what, the way that he carried himself in the league and the man that he is, I mean, I role modeled so much after the way that he carried himself. And everybody kind of has a player that's like that. And there are people who are probably looking up to him, looking up to Kadri saying, I would love to have his X, Y, and Z. So I want to wrap up with talking about, from a professional athlete perspective, knowing that people are looking up to and they may want to role model after you. What things should these athletes potentially be aware of from a mental perspective? Like, should they care at all that anybody's looking up to them and may want to role model after them? Should they care a ton? Should they just be aware of it? I'm curious to see where you guys sit on it, and if there's anything that people who are looking up to pro athletes today, kind of the other side of it, are there things that they should be wary of, right? Don't role model after the wrong person, quote unquote, or, whatever that might be. I'm curious from the role modeling standpoint, because he brings it up here. What are the pros? What are the cons of doing that? What do you think pro athletes and amateur athletes should know about this from your perspective? Morgan, I'll go to you first.
It's always interesting to me when I say they is encompassing male, female, all athletes, anybody, anywhere, actor, actress, influencer, whoever it is, and they say, I'm not a role model. I don't want to be a role model. Yes, you fucking are. Excuse my language. I know I just swore on this freaking thing. It's live.
You're loud.
You bleep that out. But I mean, I'm passionate about that. It's ridiculous when they say that, because of course you are. Of course, if you're on something that people are watching you are a role model, and you should, in my opinion, act accordingly. And I know people are going to be people. Humans are humans. They're going to do human things. All right. We can't, I'm not judging people for doing things, because we're all young. We do stupid things. We're all old. I did something stupid 10 minutes ago. I'm sure I just did something stupid 30 seconds ago. So, I mean, these things happen. I get. And going back to what Kim said, maturity, right? With age, we all become a little bit more mature, a little bit more self-aware of who we are and what we now are to the general public, or to people that are out there watching us. We are a little bit more aware of what we can have an influence on, and that is young people. Being a role model is hugely important for athletes and for anybody. And, for other things that we talk about and we say, and him, I think what he's going to come to, we talked about just a little while ago, is having a child and having somebody that's going to one day look up to him and understand, this is my dad. And he's not going to want to be, I think, the person that maybe he envisions himself now, saying, I'm not afraid to fail. Of course, we're not afraid to fail as athletes, because that's part of the game. We fail all the time, right? I mean, baseball statistics, basketball statistics. I mean, it's constant failure. We have to work through that, learn through that. But being able to have those lights on you and being able to say that I'm growing as a person and being a role model because people are out there looking at me and watching what I do, that's hugely important. One thing sticks with me. We were at a hockey game, and I think this is important for people out there to understand too, is that we were at a hockey game and there was a fight, right? And the hockey, don't do as many fights as when I used to go to games. I mean, it was a fight all the time, right? A little bit more frowning upon that, but there was a fight, and people were cheering and rioting, and I was not. My son was with me, and I wouldn't have done that anyways, because that's not how I intake hockey. But there was a dad next to me, and his son got up and was like, yeah. And this dad was pissed. He pulled him back down in the seat and said, you do not cheer for that. He was angry, but he was setting an example. He was setting expectations, saying, this is not what we're looking at. This is not your role model. It's the good goal. It's the good shot. It's the good skating. So that's my take on role models. I got a little heated there in the beginning. I apologize for anybody that's watching it.
Hey,
Didn't
that's what
like
this
the
is for, right?
Didn't
We're
like the
looking-
F-bomb thrown in there.
yeah, we're looking to get a little fire in here every once in a while. You're totally fine.
It's crazy when people say that I'm not a role model. I mean, what? How ignorant do you have to be to say something like that? It doesn't. I mean, really? Yes, you
We're
are.
literally doing it right now. If there was somebody, if there was a group of young athletes that suddenly showed up and started watching this live or watch us afterwards, and they saw this, right? What we say matters. And especially in the age of social media, everybody in every single way, especially when you take it onto any form of public matter, you become a role model to something because someone's going to see it and it is going to make an impression. And so we control how we create that impression. We don't control how someone perceives it, but we can control how we create it. And therefore, it just matters with what we put out there. It all matters because, more often than not, you see someone wanting to do something and then they have a controversial tweet from 2012, right? Where somebody says something and they're just like, what, right? Because cancel culture comes. Heaven forbid, cancel culture is a form of role modeling. Hey, if you're going to say and or do something, make it your code of ethics, right? Stand for certain things, don't stand for certain things, because guess what? Everybody is watching in one way, shape, or another at some point. They may not watch now, but who knows? 5 years from now, some people could come back and they could refer to this and be like, Morgan swears like a sailor, and I can't believe he would do that to his professional career. Not that, everybody dropped an F-bomb, right? I'm pretty sure at some point I on other episodes, I'm pretty sure I've dropped like one or two.
I'm right there with you. They say that people who actually swear are much more honest. PS, by the way.
See, you're just sharing your raw, transparent thoughts, Morgan. So if anything,
Very,
you
very
might
honest.
have just done your career a service. Who knows, right? But I mean, when it comes to creating that impression, you control what you put out there. You don't control how it's perceived, but you get to control what you put out there. And by controlling that, you can cut off certain possibilities. If you go out there and you want to throw haymakers at somebody or start a fight or get in someone's face or do something like, and on I think it was on episode 1 or 2, we talked about Antonio Brown, right? And the impression that he puts out there. You control the impression. You do not control how people perceive it. And by putting something out there that you have the intent of having a positive influence on other people, you immediately can cut off someone sitting there and villainizing you potentially, right? But if you go out there and you do something like walk off the field or the ice because you're pissed off about what a coach does, you immediately put yourself in a position where you cut off the positive potential that someone could perceive you as, right? Your decision has the intention of being positive or negative behind it, or selfish, or whatever other word you want to put in there. And it naturally creates a kind of a bubble of perception that people can pick from and say, this is how I perceive it, or this is how I perceive it this way or that way. But it cuts off certain things. So we have to have a responsibility to obviously have that impression. And when you are an athlete coming up and you're looking towards these other athletes, when you get an impression from somebody on the field or on the ice or on the court or whatever, when you get an impression like that and you start to think to yourself, you know what, I want to have this play style or this or that, do yourself a favor and educate yourself about that athlete off of the ice or the court or anything like that. Because here's what it'll do. It'll tell you if what you're trying to role model yourself afterwards is something that they do for a short period of time that may be attached to them as an athlete, or this is just something that makes up part of their character. And if you are wanting to go out onto the field, and here's the thing, Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality, he only did it for games and practices. He did not do that with his family, right? Like he understood how to turn it on and turn it off. He spent years mastering how to step in and out of that mindset. And if someone's like, I want to do, Mamba mentality, and they try and do it 24/7, oh my gosh, you're going to be a nightmare to live around. So do yourself a favor and educate yourself if what you're trying to role model is a lifestyle decision or a performance decision, because it will help you immensely understand where to potentially try that kind of stuff out. Because if you try and be intense and loud and rambunctious in your household, your mom's going to smack you upside the back of the head. But if you are loud and rambunctious and intense and you're out on the field, your coach may be like, that's what I want to see. So context matters. Don't just take something you see and try and apply it to everything. You have to educate yourself, especially when you get that impression. It goes both ways. I want to end this with Kim, the role modeling and everything else. Bring us home. What are your thoughts on it?
I think there's two things. There's two things that come to mind. One, I believe that everybody has a ripple. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. We all have an impact, and we all have someone looking at us, no matter what, whether it's a family member or a kid or a niece or a nephew or a player we coach or whatever. So I agree wholeheartedly with Morgan in that you have to act as if you are a role model, whether you want to take on that role or not, right? Yeah. I mean, people gave Marshawn Lynch a whole bunch of grief because he didn't want to do the press conferences, et cetera. But how—
you know why I'm here.
You know why I'm here. I love him. But the thing about Marshawn goes back to what my friend Tracy Ham always goes to. Her favorite quote is, how you do anything is how you do everything. Who Marshawn was off the field is exactly who he was on the field as far as taking care of his own. I mean, he takes care of people in his community in Oakland. He takes care of his mom. He's a true person in financial literacy for his colleagues and his friends. He talks about making his own brand and doing those things and doing it in a manner that lives up to his moral values and code. And I think that that's what you're asking and what you're going back to is I believe that we each have to go after our choice of sport, our career, our path, etc., with a full intention of who we are as a person. The person you see in my kitchen is the same person that wrote a book with you, is the same person that is on a soccer field. I'm in sweats most of the time because I'm around athletes most of the time. And then other times I do my hair or everything. But every single time that you meet me, I'm the same person. How you interpret me, how you see me, I swear a lot, even though I'm not doing it today. But it's like what you see is what you get. And whether it's a fully emotional side of me when I'm crying because something is tapped into a core value of mine, or whether it's I play with an intensity and a fervor of just going after with full aggression, I can't step back from that part of who I am. So some people are going to like it and some people aren't. And I think you need to embrace that part of yourself as a role model too. You're never going to please everyone. And if you attempt to, you're going to fail at all the things that you want to go after. So it really is being the person you want to be and living up to your own moral code and your own ethics to be that person. And if you can look at yourself in the mirror at night and say, I did my best today, and I can wake up in the morning, then you were successful and you get up and you do it again tomorrow. But role models, you're always a role model. You never know who's looking.
Yep. 100%. Okay. I think number one, well said all around. We've been doing this for a little over an hour. And I think we absolutely have taken some amazing points from this. And the number one thing that I want to point out here is we're fans of all athletes. Doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, what you're doing, what you have done, or what your goals are. We're a fan of all athletes. That's what we're here to do, is help uncover and dive into the other side of sports, the mental side of it that a lot of people may or may not be getting exposed to. So, I mean, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're watching this live or if you're watching this afterwards, leave some comments. Let us know what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, what you'd like to potentially see us dive into next time. This is going to be every single Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern time. I'm out here in Colorado. So for me, those were very difficult times to come up with, because for me, it's 7. So I really had to do some math there.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I broke a sweat trying to figure out the numbers.
You would have thrown an F-bomb out there. You would have gotten it
I was
faster.
this close. I was this close. But next week we should be having Bill Dean with us. Bill Dean is an incredible individual and helped kind of bring us all together originally.
Yeah.
And so we absolutely love the input that he gives. He'll be a part of this. And as time goes on, we're also going to be having special guests on here. We'll see if we can't get people who are former professional athletes every once in a while, and be able to see if we can tug on some strings and be able to get some people who are current athletes as well on here to be able to talk about their thoughts, their journey, and all this other stuff and chime in. So once again, if you like what you see here, leave a like, be able to follow us, whether it's on the Unstoppable Mindset podcast, which the audio will be posted on. And that comes out weekly after these are recorded. And also there's other episodes and other things on there where I interview people I think are very interesting to share their mindset journeys. Some of them are professional athletes. You can also find us over on YouTube at Lamar Coaching, and you can also find us. This is streaming over on Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you found this helpful, like it, share it, do whatever you need to. And otherwise, this was awesome. I appreciate you guys, and I can't wait to see y'all next week.
Thank you so much, guys. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.